Hey guys, how's it going? So 9 just came out, and this is the first character of Season 2. Gotta say also, Season 2 so far has been way better than I expected, absolutely incredible. But this new character is someone that a lot of people were waiting for ever since they saw either leaks or the silhouette of her previously. Now, you have to keep in mind there is no limited character in Season 2. They confirmed it on their stream. They said that limited characters are going to be actual seasonal in terms of like winter, autumn, summer, spring. That's how they're doing it. So Serenial was the winter limited character. So probably Season 3 has a limited character as well. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. Let's just talk about 9. So this character is a defense scaling damage dealer Vanguard. Gotta say, it's weird that she's a Vanguard because it feels like she's just a pure DPS, but I guess Vanguard just means defense scaling nowadays. Let's talk about all of her cards, her gear set, all those things. First of all, let's talk about these. So, her ult is a bit of an awkward ability to use sometimes. It costs a lot. It does a decent amount of damage in AoE, but the problem is it exhausts some of your cards, which can sometimes make it hard to use if you have another useful card from another character that perhaps costs 2 or 3 and it gets exhausted, so you have to be careful about that. So, this character revolves around Hugh. This is the most important part of her skill set, and it's incredibly strong. So you always get this card in your hand, because it starts in your hand and it sits there all the time, because at the end of the turn, it exhausts itself, but then the next level appears. So it goes from Hugh level 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Well, actually, no. It goes to 4 if you have Extreme, but not the other ones, 4 and 5. So what matters is just spamming this ability. You need as many tricks as possible to use it every turn, because it costs 3, it's so expensive, it can be hard to utilize, but the benefit is that you always have consistent damage. No matter what, you have an attack every turn, which sometimes teams struggle with. So what is the best epiphany on this card? Well, the benefit is there's actually a lot of good ones here. I tried out a decent amount of these. I would say Hugh Flash is the least useful at the moment. I have a feeling that they're going to be adding more characters with a bunch of exhaust cards, potentially the next 2 characters dropping later, because they have so much exhaust synergy, and I don't think it's only going to be for her. But at the moment, Flash is a bit hard to use. I think Extreme is incredibly strong, because if you actually have enough synergy with your team, you're able to spam so many of these in a turn, eventually up to this incredibly giant nuke at the very end. Also, Ironclad, heavily underrated by a lot of people. I was using this in a run, and I was getting to over 1,000 shield per turn, just spamming this multiple times per turn. Absolutely insane for survivability. You don't even need any sort of defensive other character if you're spamming this enough. Incredibly powerful. I would also say Massacre is incredibly strong because it's AoE, so you're able to just basically be better Yuki. Even though she got buffed, I think using this makes you stronger than Yuki by a mile. And then Ambush, it can be kind of fun to use as sort of a gimmick, I think, with characters like Magna especially, and it can work, but I think it's a little bit harder to utilize in a really well-built team. But overall, here was a lot of great choices. Now, Experienced Strike is a bit of a weird one. Overall, it's a good card because it does a nice amount of damage, increase the damage of exhaust cards, and then more importantly, it actually gives you some shield based on the damage that you're doing. The issue is that it costs AP, and if you're going to use this at the same time as spamming Hugh, sometimes you might have difficulties with that. Now, as for the best epiphany, I overall would just probably go for the number 1, where you're doing more damage and increasing damage of the Hugh by an extra amount. Now, this one potentially can be good where you get the shield gain, but I found it a little bit difficult to utilize most of the time. And then if you're going for a weird counterattack setup, this final one can be fun, but I wouldn't really recommend it. I think just overall go for 1. Most of the epiphanies don't matter that much to make a very good 9, I would say. Now, Fatal Strike is a bit of a weird one too, because it forcibly exhausts her Hugh card, and also does some damage. I tried out a few of these. The first one does a nice amount of damage and also increases the amount of damage it does based on how expensive that Hue is, which I think is a pretty nice damage nuke. The problem is it also costs AP, so it can be hard to utilize. I tried out this middle one where it changes the final level. I think it's only really worthwhile using if you're comboing it with the extreme one just for a giant nuke. I think this one is for future characters to utilize, for instance, like Teferia, as an example. I think it might be good. And then this one is very interesting. For each ally owning counterattack, it increases by 80%. And this is not additive, it's multiplicative. So potentially this could become a nuke if you have like a full counterattack team, but it's a little bit weird as of right now. Now, Counterblade, Honed Edge, I found a little bit hard to use sometimes because it's when you get shield, it activates. So you have to be able to get shield through a bunch of abilities and then do your attacks, which can be difficult. However, there's a few good utilizations of this. Number one is this. It just activates Hue at the start of your turn every time, which I think is insanely powerful. Just being able to get essentially 2 or 3 AP for free worth of damage. And then there's this one, Honed Edge Plus. So Honed Edge Plus affects the whole team rather than 9, which I think is very strong if you go for a full defense setup and you're actually able to get enough of counterattacks, because, you know, there's cards that'll give counterattack every single turn, such as Magna or some God Epiphanies or other things like that, which can be pretty strong, I would say. But other than those, I think the only other one I would really go for is the middle one, Initiation Unique. We don't have enough exhaust cards unless you have a really good setup, and then maybe this could pop off, but in general, the exhaust card is Hue. And then finally we have Fighting Spirit. I think this is the best card on this character other than Hue. I always spam copy this. I wouldn't even really copy her other cards. This one makes it so you can just use Hue multiple times per turn very easily. It's insanely powerful. Very simple. So that's the card that I normally copy, and I've removed the shield 100% of the time, and then I usually start trying to remove the slashes because I don't really think you are ever going to be playing these in most of your setups. Next, let's talk about partners. So I'm using Alsea. I think this partner seems pretty strong, especially with all of these abilities and this insanely powerful, essentially vulnerability type ability. It adds 5 caustic remarks, which adds 20 up to 30% of increased damage that they take. So it's like vulnerability, but 20 to 30%, which is really powerful. And you can pair it with vulnerability, so it's really strong. And it only costs 3. That said, I don't think you have to have this partner at all. I think you can go for Wilhelmina, because when you max dupes, it's 24% defense increase, which is kind of ridiculously big. Also, the other abilities are pretty decent all in all. I think she's a pretty solid free-to-play option, so I don't think you should be too worried about having to get this partner, especially since 9 seems pretty strong as she is right now. Next, let's talk about potentials. I mean, it's the usual, right? You max the crit rate, you max the crit damage, you go for the final node. It's pretty easy to get set up as long as you're building enough defense. You go for unique because Hue and all of her main damage things are unique cards. Pretty much the same thing as almost every other DPS except for a couple of exceptions. Next, let's talk about Manifest Ego. A lot of people are wondering about her dupes. Personally, I don't think her first dupe is very important. There might be situations where you would want to activate it on specific enemies, but I don't think it really matters much in the grand scheme of things, especially against single target. It's literally useless. It's a tiny quality of life, not a big deal. The second one, I actually think this seems pretty decently strong because adding vulnerable to make sure that your first couple of hues hit really hard is kind of big. Also, it has retain, so you can wait until the right moment where you do a big turn and a giant nuke, right? So I think it seems pretty good, but keep in mind it only works twice, so it's more for like a big opening rather than a long fight. But I do think it's pretty decent. The third one just buffs her ult by a bit of damage. That's the same as everybody. This one is every time you exhaust a card, it increases your damage by 50% up to 3 stacks. For 1 turn, though, I don't really think that's that amazing unless you're somehow using it 4 or 5 times a turn. This one is the classic, just increase your potentials. And then the final one, when Hue is activated, inflict 15% of the damage dealt to the target as fixed damage. It's okay. I don't really think it's anything special. At most, I would go for 2, but honestly, I don't really even think she needs any of these dupes. I think she's good enough. Next, memory fragments. Do not use this set. So, Smilegate made a little bit of a mistake. This is going to sound like a shock to all of you listening right now, but they actually mistranslated this set. I know, it's unbelievable that with their impeccable translations this whole time since launch, that they would actually make a mistake saying what this set does. And you know what's crazy is they made 2 giant mistakes with it. So first of all, apparently it's not additive, it's multiplicative. Normally when something says plus 30% rather than just 30% damage increase, it means additive. Well, it's actually a multiplicative 30% damage increase. Secondly, this only works on exhaust cards. So if you have this set on any of these characters thinking like, oh, this is great for Haru or these other characters, no, it actually sucks. It's only for exhaust cards. They need to fix this as soon as possible. That is a massive mistake. Also, side note, this looks like it's additive. It's also multiplicative. So great. I would say this is by far the best set that you want to use on her. The second best set might be the normal order set that we had before, and then probably the third best set is somewhere around the one that I'm currently using with the extra crit chance. I don't think it's really needed. If you get good enough gear with over 60% crit chance, I think that's good enough, and then you just go for that multiplicative set. Huge amount of damage. Now, the secondary set, I would go for the crit damage one. You could use the defense set, but the crit damage one is going to get you more damage overall. And obviously, you just prioritize crit rate, crit damage, and defenses. So that's overall what you're looking for. Now, one added thing I want to say is because we now have additional things with gear, you could almost say that these are like epiphanies. And what are the best things to go for these? Well, something like this. Increased damage of 2 cost or higher attack cards, or when you use a 3 AP card, you get 1 AP back. I would get those kinds of bonuses. Anything that buffs up Hugh is pretty much important. Also keep in mind that this weapon is mistranslated as well, and I believe it's when you don't attack for a turn, you get a huge damage bonus next turn. You're not really ever going to do that on this character, though. You're attacking every single turn. Tons of mistranslations. All in all, I would say 9 is basically the new Haru in a lot of ways, and they did buff Haru, and I think Haru can be pretty solid, but she plays very similarly, but more consistently. Rather than having to make sure you're getting the anchor shots, you just always have Hugh in hand every single turn. Her damage seems incredibly good so far, and she has some nice little defensiveness with some of the shields. I also think that you're able to utilize her with a lot of different characters. What are some of the best characters you want to use her with? Well, I would say Narja is overall a really solid target. She's just amazingly good overall, heals a bunch, and can buff your defense damage with your team, which I think is great. I would also say Magna is a pretty cool pairing as well, if I can find her. There she is. Magna adds vulnerability, which, since you're not doing multi-hits, is incredibly strong for 9 as well. She also puts on a bunch of shield, and she's pretty fun. The thing is, you have to keep in mind is since you're focusing so much AP on 9, you kind of need other characters that are relatively low maintenance. Like, they don't have to be spamming tons of AP cards every turn. I think Magna is able to get some decent setup with a lot of things that just automatically happen, which I think can be strong. But then also a character that fits that perfectly is Orlia. And I did try out Orlia since they just added the new like synchro system thing where you can instantly bring the character up to level 60 and have them geared, which is absolutely crazy, by the way. I don't even see the point of leveling characters now. I think Orlia pairs really well with her because she has so many cards that you just sit in hand and wait until a big turn. And you can also buff the damage of Hugh enormously when you use Softy, which can be incredibly good. Also, just getting shields is nice just for more survivability, and the healing is awesome. But since she can just sit there AFK, I think she is a great character to use with her. So if you use her and Narja, you can kind of just sit back and relax while 9 just spams abilities every turn. So I think they're pretty solid choices. Some people have been trying out some other combos as well, such as Luke, where you spam so many exhaust cards that it's able to benefit some of 9's abilities. I think that works, but overall, I don't know if it's perfect. Now, I do think that Serenial can combo really well with a few of her abilities, such as the Hugh that I was talking about earlier, Flash. If you're spamming so many of Serenial's attacks, and since they cost 0, pretty easy to utilize. Also, Hugh does a lot of tenacity damage, so you're easily able to break them for Serenial to go again. Serenial's so OP, though, you can kind of just use her with everybody. So there is that. Also, you can just use a character like Calipe as well, because she's defense scaling, but I didn't try her out too much. I think it's probably fine, but I feel like it's a little bit redundant. She's almost like a weaker 9 in a lot of respects. So I didn't really feel the need to use her. But overall, those are kind of the setups that I was most interested in. Next, I'm probably going to try out Veronica, since Veronica is another AFK character that can kind of just sit there without spamming abilities, and you can get 0 cost repose and stuff to spam more card draw. I think that's really good as well. I would use those overall with 9. I think she's an incredibly strong character. I think she's very fun. Do I think she's a must pull? No, not really. I don't really think there's such thing as a must pull in a roguelike game, since 90% plus of the gameplay is in chaos and not the stuff out. I would say just try and have as much fun in chaos. That said, I think she's one of the best DPS that I've used so far, and also one of the most fun. If you just like really big, weighty attacks, I would go for that. Complete opposite of a character like Serenial. Also, this is actually a sponsored video somehow, and I'd appreciate it if you guys click the link below. It really helps me out. Click the CZN link, and thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you next time.